Welcome. My name is Dean Slauson with the Microsoft Research Program Management Team, and I would like to welcome James here today, who will be speaking about business solutions. We haven't had them in here for a number of months, so it'll be exciting to see what all the updates are, kind of learn about this relatively new part of our company. So I'll take it away.
Thank you for the kind introduction. Hi, I'm James Utzschneider. My email alias is JamesU. I've been at Microsoft, this is now my 9th year. I've spent most of my time working on middleware, ranging from DCOM to MTS to COM Plus to next-gen Windows services, which morphed into .NET. I've spent the last couple of years working on business process automation and the last year within Microsoft Business Solutions. What I'd like to do today is give you an update and overview of MBS. Specifically, I'd like to give you enough of a flavor of the types of problems that we're facing and working on right now that it could give you a potential idea of how you could plug into us with some of the research that you're doing within Microsoft Research. Although I have about 25 or so slides and I'm in the after lunch slot, please feel free to speak up and ask questions as we go through this. I'd like to make this as informal as possible. So, any questions before I start? Great. Microsoft Business Solutions is one of the company's core 7 businesses. It was created through 2 acquisitions and a merger. The acquisition of Great Plains Software about a year and a half ago, along with the acquisition of Navision Software, which was completed last July. We took these 2 software companies that we acquired and we integrated them with the bCentral hosted web service that was run out of this company over the last 3 years. bCentral was a B2B, and is a B2B portal that was providing small business marketing, lead management, and other types of automated services. We're the biggest division of Microsoft that a lot of people haven't heard of so far because my group under Satya Nadella, our corporate VP, currently has about 1,350 devs, program managers, and testers located in 3 primary development centers around the world. Here in Redmond, in Fargo, North Dakota, which was the headquarters of Great Plains, and in Woodbeck, Denmark, which is a suburb of Copenhagen and is where Navision was headquartered. Satya's division is 1,300. Overall, we have 1,700 R&D because we also have a small business application group that's going after the market currently targeted by Intuit with QuickBooks. And we've decided to keep that as a separately focused group that's going after a separately focused competitor. The interesting thing about working with the folks from Fargo and the Danes is that they've been in this space for an awfully long time. Both companies have about a 20-year experience. They both grew up with a very similar business model where they built mid-market accounting software that companies that with employees ranging from 50 in number up to 2, 3, maybe even 500 or 600 would use to run their business. So think of our products as mini ERP applications that smaller-sized companies would deploy and sell. And just like the large ERP vendors like SAP, this market has evolved into a manner where customers are expecting to buy a suite. In addition to just buying core financial applications like accounts receivable, accounts payable, general ledger management, they're moving on to things like CRM, supply chain management, advanced planning. So many of the characteristics of the type of products that we sell have function that's similar to function that we run here at Microsoft with our SAP implementation. One of the challenges that we face from a business perspective in selling into this market is that we have to sell via a channel, so that we rely upon third-party software companies and third-party ISVs who take our software and generally do some customization and extension to it before it winds up getting installed at a mid-market company. So let's say here in the Seattle area, there's a company that's a tire distributor that may have 120 employees that distributes tires to, I don't know, 100, 150 different types of automobile dealerships. we don't sell the software directly to this tire distributor. We may wind up having someone who's a software company or a consultant who specializes in mid-market distribution. And they will take our software and they may extend it and enhance it in order to meet the needs of a tire distributor. And they may take products and create some specific tire characteristics to it. This creates a very interesting set of challenges for us in terms of being able to upgrade our software and the models that we use and our partners use for how they extend and enhance our product. Because oftentimes our partners wind up making changes to the product that become incompatible with future releases that we do. So we have an interesting upgrade problem. But we have an ecosystem of 6,000, 7,000 partners right now throughout the world who distribute these products for us. As I mentioned earlier, we target the mid-market, which is a relatively large market from an economic standpoint. But it's a very fragmented market from a business perspective. There is no SAP or PeopleSoft within the mid-market that has 50, 60, 80% share. Great Plains in the United States, selling accounting applications to companies of this size, was the market share leader with 14%. Navision was one of the market share leaders behind SAP in Europe for their market, and they had similar share. So there's a very large number of very, very small companies with relatively antiquated code bases that don't have the development resources to keep up with the evolving requirements of companies that want to do interesting new things in order to deploy these types of applications. So from a business perspective, Microsoft saw an opportunity for us to be able to come into a market that was underserved by existing companies and make a good business selling to companies. From a development perspective, and from my own personal perspective of having worked on middleware for the greater part of the last decade here at Microsoft, acquiring Great Plains and Navision helps us theoretically, but it's actually turning out to be true, helps us better understand the requirements for our software platform. Because one of the patterns that Microsoft has fallen into again and again and again when we ship middleware products is we wind up spending an awful lot of time going through architecture and architecture scenarios without having this very, very tight customer connection. Because customers don't buy middleware, they buy actual solutions. And I know of at least 15 different code-named middleware, whether it's data access, object management, messaging efforts that Microsoft has shipped over the last decade, which really didn't have an immediate customer impact. And one of the reasons it didn't have a customer impact is because when you're building middleware without understanding deeply what the solution is, you're never quite done. And it's very difficult to understand where you end and where the application actually begins. It's also an incomplete solution because unless you're selling directly to a developer, companies don't deploy it. So what we want to be able to do with the addition of the Navision and Great Plains applications to our portfolio is to try and create the type of symbiotic relationship between applications and our application platform as what existed in the desktop between Office and Windows over the course of the last decade. Office drove requirements into Windows. Windows was able to take those requirements and implement things like OLE in order to meet the specific end-user-driven requirements of Office. And what we plan to do is as we start rolling out more of our products, we can provide a direct connection into the platforms group so that we can build a better platform to serve customers better. And in doing so, we also plan to move up market into the departmental category of companies and also move down market going after Intuit in the lower market. This picture shows our product roadmap. And I'd like to walk you through it so that you can get an understanding of some of the development challenges that we face within our organization. As I mentioned at the opening of this talk, we have 3 core development centers in Denmark, Fargo, and here. But today we have 5 core code bases because Great Plains grew by making a major acquisition, Solomon Software, which was selling a similar type of mid-market accounting application. Navision grew by acquiring another Danish mid-market software company called Damgard, which built a mid-market software application. And then Microsoft internally has built up a CRM application that we built from scratch as a .NET based app. In order for us to get any type of significant leverage in this market, we have to be able to migrate from these 5 code bases to a common code base. And we have a project to do so under the code name of Green, and I'll spend a lot of time walking through what that actually means. But we have to do so in a manner that can carry forward our existing 200,000 customers who are running each one of these 5 code bases today. We have to do so in a manner where we can take a lot of function that is being implemented across all of our different code bases in a similar manner, like sales order processing, and migrate to a design and architecture where we have one group that's doing that extremely well and other groups can leverage off of that. Which then gets into really interesting challenges that we face in terms of using some type of loosely coupled integration architecture, about different types of process software taxonomies that enable us to have some type of hierarchy of understanding which components within our system are being developed where, how they get integrated together, and how we use system services across them. So part of our strategy is to come up with a new application foundation that will serve as the platform for our next generation accounting applications. This foundation is called the Microsoft Business Framework. And we shipped an SDK version of it along with something called the Business Portal, a portal that sits in front of the Great Plains application. We did that this month. And MBF provides a programming model, a service model, and an integration model for this next generation set of accounting, supply chain, and customer relationship management applications that we build. So what we want to be able to do is over the course of the next couple of years, be able to do an incremental release of our 4 core accounting applications. Azapta is the name of the Damgard accounting application out of one of the bases there. Use this MBF layer as initially a next generation object layer that enables us to have a portal with a common set of APIs and a common service environment against all of these different back-end applications. And then what we're doing is we're taking one of our code bases and one of our development teams from Damgard for a product called Azapta. They have the freshest implementation of an accounting application across the 4 major ones that we have today. When I say freshest, it's a well-factored 3-tier design that has a very good use of centralized metadata and centralized metadata to drive configuration and UI. And we're taking the Azapta application model and we're marrying it to this lower level .NET-based application framework in MBF. And we're going to use this as the basis for our next generation suite of applications, which is codenamed Green, and is currently planned to ship towards the end of 2004, early 2005. Separately, we have a separate code base for our CRM application that shipped earlier this year. The CRM application is going to go through a refresh at the end of this year in order to support multi-currency function. This release was US only. This will enable it to be sold in Europe and overseas. Towards the end of next year, we want to be able to ship this core application built on a modern foundation and provide a loosely coupled integration framework across CRM, our next generation application, and the wrappers that we build on top of our existing accounting applications, so that we can have some semblance of a suite similar to Office version 1.0 10 years ago, which is more of a sales and marketing vehicle than it was truly integrated from the ground up way for doing personal productivity applications. And then in the subsequent wave, we're going to start refactoring more and more of this business logic, so we wind up shipping more and more of our top-level application function in our different domains like supply chain, CRM, etc., as part of this next generation suite. So by the time Longhorn ships, we're building all of our different application function for all of these different domains that we serve, but we're doing it from a single foundation. Now, one of the decisions that the company made over the course of the last month is to take this application foundation, MBF, and I'll go through some slides of what is in MBF, and have that report into Eric Rudder's organization, and have this application foundation ship as part of subsequent releases of Visual Studio moving forward. And for us, this is just this wonderful double win, because for starters, it enables us to take the expertise that we developed building business applications over the course of the last 20 years and have that learning and knowledge about how you structure application-level object models as opposed to lower-level integration-based object models, and have that just become part of the core Microsoft platform. It also creates the framework for us to have this very, very tight integration between application requirements coming from us working with customers and platform requirements, so that we now have instituted into how we're organized organizationally the makings for having this type of symbiotic relationship that existed between Office and Windows a decade ago. Does this all make sense so far? Yes?
Just one question. Are you expecting external customers to leverage that core API to develop their own technology?
The question was, are we expecting external customers to leverage the core API in order to use this technology? The answer is absolutely. One of the concerns that has been raised in the market through our acquiring all of these two different ISVs over the course of the last year was raised by other ISVs who are saying, gee, Microsoft, are you going to try and take over the world and put every ISV that's been working very nicely with Microsoft over the course of the last 10 or 20 years out of business? And the answer is no. What we want to be able to do is extend the platform that we provide ISVs above and beyond the base level CLR class library level of stuff in order to provide application-specific object libraries that enables them to be able to take developers that they have building plumbing and refocus those people in order to build more end-user services. We just concluded a roadshow in Europe where we met with about 600 people from 300 to 400 ISVs, and we went through 2 days of business briefing and technical briefings on this whole strategy, and specifically what we're offering them as an implementation platform on this. And we got fairly favorable feedback from ISVs. Yes?
Do you think that would be Microsoft's answer to J2E and EJB?
The question is this similar to J2E and EJB? The answer is there's some function in J2E and EJB that is mirrored in some of the work that we're doing. But we're providing additional layers of object services that lend themselves more to business applications. And I'll go into that somewhat in the presentation.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On the SCM, what are the solutions that you have on the roadmap within the SCM world?
Mm-hmm. The question was, within supply chain management, what are the solutions that we have in the roadmap? Today, each one of these ERP applications is very tightly integrated into application modules, which are our sort of product-level building blocks that companies would consider supply chain management. This is sales order processing, purchase order processing, inventory management, warehouse management.
Okay.
These wind up being application function that is focused on running parts of an individual company inside the four walls of a company.
Right.
What we haven't done any work on to date is the sexier web service-based cross-company process integration, which is what a lot of people, which is a hot area within supply chain right now. We have a product that we're shipping. I think the current RTM date is now August, called the Microsoft Business Network, which is the first step towards a company-to-company process-based integration service that has a couple of interesting features, and I have a slide on that in there. And I also have a couple of slides at the end that go into some specific supply chain issues that we're talking, because frankly, there's two areas within Microsoft Research that we could use some help on with supply chain. One is obviously planning algorithms, because that's just, supply chain's always looking for that. And the second one is helping us come up with our strategy for RFID. And for those of you who may not have heard of it, RFID is the little 4-cent tags that are going to go on everything made and sold in stores over the course of the next few years. And it's going to change the software that anyone buys in order to manage physical goods within companies.
Actually, I'm not part of the MSR team, but I can talk to you about RFID after the meeting. On the SCM side, again, a follow-up question is that, again, in terms of our partners, essentially we are growing the SCM footprint and incorporating. Previously, it was inter-enterprise solutions like inventory management. Now you're going more collaborative, maybe CPFR or maybe more inter-enterprise kind of applications, and that is right in the backyard of some of the partners that we have. Like JDA, for instance, is a partner in our retail space. So when they see this kind of a roadmap, definitely they will be threatened. So what is our plan? Is the plan to incrementally address the entire supply chain space and just have only ISVs like Accentures of the world work with us to implement the solutions and phase out the partnerships that we have with the solution providers?
No, what our strategy is to expand the platform that our ISV partners use, because so much of the code that they're writing today at a company like JDA, which is more retail than supply chain, so much of the code that they write today has actually nothing to do with the supply chain specific or retail specific function that shows up in the screens, reports, and processes implemented within their application. So we just want
Manhattan Associates. We are partners with them. So Manhattan Associates is pure supply chain company.
Within supply chain, there's a lot of different specific functions. And Manhattan Associates, I2, they focus primarily on supply chain optimization, supply chain management. What no one has done a good job at so far is supply chain communications and supply chain processes that execute across multiple companies. And the reason why no one's done a good job at it is for you to be able to take a Manhattan Associates application that has very, very rich collaborations and get it to work for, say, that tire distributor in Bellevue that may have 150 customers. You would need to have a piece of Manhattan Associates code installed at the tire distributor and then at 150 of their customers.
You're going to address only the spokes, not the hubs?
No, we're doing both.
Okay.
There is one quick addition to that. Javed and I and John are in the same group related to the Industry Solutions Group.
Yes.
And from a segment point of view, I guess this is more towards small and business tier as opposed to Javed's question, or probably related more towards the high-end, larger, industry solutions, enterprise level.
I used to manage a project codenamed Blizzard a year and a half ago out of David Vaskovich's group. And we did a fairly extensive study of mid-market distributors and manufacturers. And a typical 200-person manufacturer has 1,500 partners, 1,100 customers, 400 active suppliers. They need to use EDI, lots of different types of communication mechanisms, multiple warehouses, product catalogs in the 20 to 30,000, item lists or product catalogs in the 20 to 30,000 range. I mean, so even companies within our space have a fairly sophisticated set of needs.
My comment and question was about, there is a lot of high-end retail enterprise aspect of the Microsoft Industry Solutions business. This is more small, medium, and product focused.
Correct.
Question is there a uniform strategy? There is some group that is putting together a uniform strategy, especially for RFID, which has a tremendous impact on both sides.
Frankly, I didn't even know there was an industry group within research, and I'm delighted to hear this, so I want to follow up with you guys.
It's not within research.
Okay.
We're not in research, although there are researchers who are talking with them.
Okay, cool.
They're actually part of ISG.
Cool. So you work in Jerry Elliott's group?
Yes. Yeah. No, not, but she's our number one customer, and her organization is our key customer. We're in Paul Fleschner's group.
Got it.
Bill Anderson.
Okay, you work for Bill Anderson.
Bill Anderson.
So just some of the challenges which I think might be relevant to people within research that we're wrestling with right now include how do we move to a suite from 5 different code bases that winds up being a .NET loosely coupled, Longhorn enabled, Indigo enabled modern, composable, flexible, process-based as opposed to function and schema-based set of applications in a manner that is not an abrupt change for our customers, so that we can give them a migration strategy where they might be able to deploy some next generation modules that interact in some sort of loosely coupled way with our current generation modules. And I just left an offsite that we're having in the building next door with all of our application architects, where we're spending a couple of days starting to hammer out what this loosely coupled application architecture for our different products would actually mean. And it's a very, very hard set of problems, because it's not enough to simply just say, here's the set of SOAP interface and WSDLs that we'll put across our different components. It's a multi-dimensional problem, because we have an organizational issue that we face, where we have development teams in 3 different geographically dispersed areas, who today are each writing code that overlaps with 40% of the code that the other 2 areas are building. So we know we need to be able to come up with a way to organize ourselves so that within 2 or 3 years, everyone's just focusing on one set of code that winds up being shared by other groups within our organization. The second problem that we face is that there's application function that cuts across different logical business modules that we might sell. So for instance, our CRM team is spending the next year with 90% of their resources focused on building a multi-currency VAT set of components and algorithms for their application so that they can sell it in Europe. Multi-currency control and VAT has nothing to do with traditional CRM functions like sales order processing, purchase order processing, call center management. But in order to sell in Europe, they need that function. That function exists in our 4 different main ERP backends today. But that code, when it was implemented 5 to 10 years ago, made it impossible to be able to pull out the VAT function without pulling along the general ledger function, the accounts receivable function, without pulling along the database, without pulling along the security model, etc. And we realized that it made more sense, believe it or not, to take the hit and spend a year building VAT within CRM than it was to try and get our customers to install a copy of Great Plains in Europe when they wanted to start doing that sort of thing. Because we have an indirect sales model, and because, based on all of our feedback from customers, we want to move away from this monolithic way of deploying applications, we need to build our next generation suite. So it's based around pluggable components that get, to use a BizTalk term, orchestrated together in a variety of custom and unique ways. Because a business is simply a collection of processes, and processes can cross multiple different domains. And it's very difficult for you to implement hard-coded within a software application a process that winds up being useful for a business. The other thing that occurs is a business may decide that they really like our sales modules and our core bookkeeping modules, but they want to pull out our really lightweight inventory management application and put in a Manhattan Associates inventory management application that's much richer for their specific domain. We want to be able to do this in a way where Manhattan Associates doesn't have to merge their database with our database. So we need this pluggable, and I don't want to sound buzzwordy, but a loosely coupled asynchronous API in order to be able to do this. Pluggable components gets really interesting from a versioning perspective, since we are using an indirect model, because many of these pluggable components wind up being implemented by our partners. And the model that has been used to date by SAP, PeopleSoft, Oracle, JD Edwards, Navision, and DamGuard has been to distribute the source code of our application to our channel and distribution partners. So if they want to write a new inventory module, they have the source to do so. The problem with this source code-based customization is that when we want to do an upgrade, it breaks their customization. So it winds up making it very difficult for us to sell future versions of our product. It makes it very fearful for customers to want to be able to do an upgrade. It makes it impossible for one of our customers to take 2 or 3 or 4 ISV products and install them together because they run into source code provisions. So we want to be able to do pluggable components in a way where we're distributing compiled code. Our customers, our developer partners have the same developer user experience of working directly to source, but we can upgrade, they can upgrade, and it doesn't break. In order to have pluggable components, a loosely coupled web service architecture, and an integration of current and next gen, we need to be able to define our applications with a business object layer so that there's a shared set of semantics, a shared set of understanding of processes, a shared set, common understanding of data, so that when I say a customer, you say a customer, we have the same basic understanding of what that means. And the only way to do that is to have an object layer and a service layer that's built around it. The next thing that we're wrestling with is overlaying taxonomies and the use of taxonomies into how we build our applications. And there's lots of different types of taxonomies that we need to address. Some of you may be familiar with Norm Judah's module map, the idea of having an organizational taxonomy of how a company works. Well, an organizational taxonomy is kind of similar to how we're organized today, because we sell CRM, which winds up being deployed in the sales and marketing organizations. We sell financial management, which tends to get installed in accounting. And we sell supply chain, which tends to get installed down in the warehouse or on the factory floor. But as you start going down deeper into the organizational taxonomy, you start getting a sense for the various actors within a company that get touched by our software, especially as we start automating processes that are richer, so that a sales order winds up, as part of the automated sales order screens and function that we build within our application, a sales order winds up touching inventory, sales, finance, credit, perhaps even sending out an EDI or a web service call out to suppliers so you can check our suppliers' inventory, that sort of thing. Well, in order to organize this in a way that makes sense for a development organization with 1,300 people, is you need a taxonomy of like who's building what for which part of our customers. We need a process taxonomy because when you start thinking about these very long-running, complex business processes, like how do I actually create a new customer or how do I add a new employee, that type of process, which is kind of separate from the organizational structure, winds up touching a lot of different groups in the company. We know we need to have a software taxonomy. What's an application? What's a module? What's a component? What's a business entity? What's an event? What's a message? And how we tie these things together. So these are all areas that we're wrestling with right now. A second area that we're wrestling with is the UI of business applications and how that's going to change. Right now, if you look at our four main code bases, they all are very, very similar. From a functional perspective, an accounting suite consists of a series of forms, reports, data tables, business processes, and then some admin and services. Our applications today range from between 500 to 1,400 screens, between 200 and 800 reports, upwards of 1,500 tables, and between 200 and 600 processes. If you shoot me a note, I can send you the exact data. The applications that get deployed with our supply chain modules wind up having the largest number of forms. Well, just from a pure software development management perspective, having to manage 1,400 unique forms is kind of a pain. One of the things that Navision did, DamGuard did, is they moved to a metadata-driven model so that they have declarative forms that derive directly off of data objects and process objects within the application. So that makes form maintenance somewhat easier. But you all have these structured kinds of forms. The problem from a user's perspective is that the actual processes that users within business applications are implementing, maybe half of those processes are captured today within the forms and function and data in the software that we sell and distribute to them, especially when you're getting into collaborations and iterations and returns and things like that. And business application software has wound up forcing our users to live in two worlds. There's the forms and reports within SAP or whatever they're using to fill in orders, to create customers, to do queries. And then there's the spreadsheets, the emails, and the documents that they produce as part of the rest of their work. As part of this Blizzard survey that we did a year and a half ago for mid-market manufacturers and distributors, for every purchase order document, a formal document generated by the ERP system that gets exchanged between business partners, there are 7 faxes sent. So Blizzard has now morphed into this project now codenamed Halifax. And one of the things that they're doing some cool research on is creating the equivalent of a virtual customer folder. Because one of the things that we've discovered when we toured all of these companies is that because their existing ERP system only dealt with the formal price lists and catalogs and orders, yet they had all these letters and emails and notes and faxes from customers, despite their having computers and servers, they wound up having a paper customer folder be their folder of record for all interactions with customers, because it's the only way to merge these two worlds together. One of our key objectives, and in doing so, we're creating some really interesting scenarios for Longhorn, is to bring these two worlds together. So that at a minimal level, data and transactions captured within our forms and reports can be torn away, disconnected from the system, put into an Office document, mailed with state and an understanding of long-running transactions and concurrency and things like that, out to a business partner or a group of colleagues that we iterate on and bring back together. So we've got a couple of different projects that are looking at an initial standpoint, just using Office as the container for our UI. So our CRM product that we shipped in March, actually, its top 3 defining features are the fact that all of our forms are implemented as Outlook forms within Outlook, because it just makes sense. If I'm dealing with customers, if I'm sending proposals, price lists, etc., it's just done within Outlook. The MBN product that we're shipping this summer, this supply chain communications product, is doing the same. So the user within Outlook uses Outlook for managing their business process communications with their partners, and then we have an engine that gets over this deployment problem that I mentioned earlier with Manhattan Associates, having to put Manhattan Associates software onto like suppliers and sellers by letting you, from an Outlook, decide I'm going to send this business document via fax, email, XML, or EDI out to a partner. But there's a lot more that we want to do with this. We have a research project codenamed Gideon that is looking at a disconnected Office-based UI where we stage state and transaction context down within a local store using a lot of Office components. So like Visio, it would wind up being, our UI would wind up being an Office family member. And in doing so, we can leverage a lot of Office function, a lot of Office components, the grammar checker, the logic checker, the Outlook multi-layered view control, things like that. So we're spending a lot of time looking at that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, just our supply chain group made an appeal, for me to make an appeal to you, that we're going to be building a new supply chain planning and management analysis application. So we'll be needing some help on algorithms and also on RFID.
Good question. Have you been working with the PIW team?
What's PIW? The question was, have we been working with the PIW team?
What is the PIW? It's information worker team that we recently had.
Peter Renierson's team?
Under the
yeah.
Wendy were calling.
Yeah, both of us report to Peter Renierson.
Okay. There are groups. There are John Licata is the guy running Gideon. I think he's met with some of you guys. So there has been some discussions taking place.
They are proposing the model that the end user, information worker, always stays in Office, and using web services, they are orchestrating the business process. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if that model is going to be followed in MBF.
Well, we've got one product shipping today that does that.
Business Desk?
No, CRM.
Oh, CRM. Sorry, you're right.
So we're like totally on that train.
But the CRM doesn't follow MBF. It's a different code base and different object model.
Correct, which is why we're going to... CRM was implemented outside of MBF because MBF wasn't ready for CRM, but we're going to be integrating them together.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. One quick question, another question is, I was involved with that group a little bit last year. Navision had R&D type environment called Jamaica.
Yes.
Just beautiful. It was great, a high-level model, and then you execute the model. You never do any changes at the code level. question is MBF or the new?
The question, I'm repeating because I have a microphone. The Vision had this project code named Jamaica a year ago that had some really nice metadata-driven design, especially around building UI and that sort of thing. Lars Hammer, the architect for Jamaica, is now working on MBF, and most of the concepts within Jamaica are being integrated into our framework.
Including in the new VS.NET org.
Correct.
Great, that's great to hear.
So what
Question on the next point. So if you're done with this, on the supply chain algorithms, have you considered, iLog kind of tools, working with your supply chain or CRM apps to encode some of the optimization algorithms? Because they do provide an environment where you have a linear programming solver. All you do is you go and define your constraints and your decision variables, and then there you go. You have an algorithm.
What I'd like to do is give you a name or an email alias. His alias is Rohit B. Rohit Bhargava. He's our supply chain architect, and he'd be a good guy to follow up on that one. Okay? What I'd like to do is just walk you through our thinking behind Green and what we're doing with that. To get back to the EJB, J2EE question that someone raised, and this is a slide that we've shown to the execs a lot, and it wound up driving the decision to move our MBF team into Visual Studio. Despite all of the success that we've had with WinDNA and our application stack, and all of the success that Sun and IBM have had with their application stack, if you go in and you do a code review of any major ERP or significant ISV application out there today, you will find a significant amount of application code that has nothing to do with actual application logic that these different types of companies had to implement in order to just get their applications to work. An example being, if we have an application that consists of 1,400 forms, I want to be able to have a UI framework so that if I change attributes within my customer object, I don't have to go out and hand update every one of my 120 forms that touch the customer object. I want to be able to just do that once. Microsoft doesn't have any software today that manages that for you. And there's no function within J2EE or EJB that manages that for you. So this is the sort of function that Manhattan Associates, I2, and other types of vendors like that had to go out and implement. And we know this because we have 4 of these code bases, and we've also spent a lot of time looking at people who have code bases like this. So even before you even get into things like defining an actual customer, the fact that there's some application scaffolding that's above and beyond what we have in the platform today is something that we needed to build. Now, if you're looking at just common business process logic, how do I create orders, accept sales, define products, update customers, hire employees? A customer is a customer is a customer. You can go to different applications, and the actual customer object, one application may have 90 attributes, at another application it may have 107 attributes, but it's more or less in the same ballpark and does the same basic thing. And what we've learned is that there's no competitive advantage for I2 and how their 13 incremental customer attributes within their customer object compared to SAP's implementation of a customer object. And frankly, what we've learned, and we had confirmed for us in this ISV roadshow that we did over the last few months, is that the base level set of business objects within an application is not a competitive differentiator for ISVs. And if they could license that as part of their platform, they would. Personally, this came as a big surprise to me because I've seen ISVs very resistant to license subsequent layers of object models from companies. And I also saw firsthand the experience that IBM had with their San Francisco project, which is very, very similar to what we're doing with our Microsoft Business Framework in Green. But San Francisco, and if you want, I can follow up via email, but San Francisco was never a success in the market. I'm sorry.
Before you continue, I'm sorry. Why don't you say it? Why do they say it's not a competitive advantage? Can you give me examples of why? It's not to have these core business objects.
Because everyone needs them, and they're all the same.
You don't build in connections through those objects. You won't be able to build in connections to the other objects and have.
No, they build connections into their other objects.
Like,
But in the application space, competitive differentiation winds up either being the domain-specific business logic. I can enable you to manage my scheduling of trucks coming into my warehouse in a way that's way more efficient than what anyone else can do.
and then there's some fundamental objects that they use to do that.
Yeah, but like from that, so from the perspective of that ISV, the truck, a truck is a truck is a truck. But like how I actually do advanced things above and beyond the fact that there is like a certain set of data defining a truck. It has wheels, an engine, a driver, and things like that.
Because like the one thought I said, like one of the competitive advantages, say, to route your trucks more efficiently. And I thought some of the technology, the business logic, the domain logic, would have to filter down into the actual representation of the truck.
It absolutely has to. So there has to be a very clean, standardized way to do so.
Okay.
But what we've learned in going through our code bases and looking at competitor code bases is that this layer between the differentiation part and the lower level part, there's not that much different between them. Yet it winds up being a significant investment for IS. It's a tax they have to pay in order to be in the application space. Another way to think of what we're doing is our strategy is competing more with systems integrators than it is with ISVs. Because if we can enable ISVs to take application code that they were writing here and repurpose these resources at higher end specific domain logic, it means that they can sell more customized, finely tuned applications to customers so that they don't have to go out and hire ISVs to write a bunch of code. So it makes so much sense for Microsoft to look at a picture like this and say, let's evolve our platform. Because we sell software that's broadly deployed in large horizontal markets. And what we've realized is with the correct implementation, this level of software is just an extension of the platform that is beneath it. Just like data access was an extension to the platform 3 years ago and Common UI was an extension to the platform a decade ago. For those of you who are uninitiated, this is a picture of the module map. And there's an internal URL called HTTP module map where you can get actual information on this. It's an organizational taxonomy of a generic set of company functions. And it's implemented as a database and as a very, very complex Visio diagram. But it's a hierarchy that basically says within a company, there's 5 core functions. There's generate demand, sales and marketing, create new products, R&D, fulfill demand, manufacturing, inventory, and logistics, and manage and run your enterprise, HR, financials, planning. Tying them all together is this 5th module called collaboration. What this thing does is in each one of these 5 higher level domains, it breaks down at a 4-level taxonomy all of the specific business functions like financials, sub-functions within financials like general ledger, chart of accounts, which all companies have. And then within general ledger, a specific level of atomic types of functions. The other thing it does is it documents the process and document flows between these different types of organizations so that you can actually take this, and it documents these flows within a company, and it also documents the information and process flows between the company and its customers, suppliers, and third-party business providers. So you can use this from a process mapping standpoint to follow the path of a process through a company, like accept a purchase order. And you can use it to functionally walk through what parts of a company are actually touched by accepting a purchase order. And from a product planning perspective, it gives us a map to look at all of our different applications that we build today, which may have 30, 40% overlap in the code that they've implemented, and figure out how we're going to wind up having one team building a sales order module that's a world-class sales order module that all of our other teams just call. So, but the point that this slide makes is that just within a typical mid-market company, we've documented 782 process flows at a relatively high level. Yes?
It's actually, correct me if I'm wrong, even more complex than this, because this doesn't represent the services component that an organization may have.
It doesn't represent a services component. It's horizontal in nature, so there's nothing in here about accepting patients or healthcare. So you could do an overlay of healthcare or a specific vertical on it.
Right.
And when you actually get to it, when you look at any one of the processes in it, it's very good as sort of a planning tool in its current implementation, but it's not deep enough to enable us to design and build new software because it's not functionally deep enough.
I have a comment on that. Actually, if you think of this as the domain view of a business collaboration framework, the business object layer, which you identified in a few slides before, which is so important for business software to work together, is essentially a reification of this at the object level. That's what it is.
No. And I say that because I've just spent a day and a half in a room with our architects who have built 20 years of these products. And what we've realized is that there are 3 separate taxonomies that we need. This is actually a capability taxonomy that says within companies there's a group called like chart of accounts. Separate from that, there's going to be a software taxonomy, which is, here's a CRM application. A CRM application does these like 15 different things. And separate from this is a process taxonomy, because this actually, it documents capabilities and flows between capabilities, but it doesn't document processes. Because every company winds up having different and unique processes. And one of the things that we're wrestling with is how do we take these 3 different types of taxonomies that are all related and turn them into a product plan that makes sense.
Are you familiar with the Zachman framework?
Pardon me?
Are you familiar with the Zachman framework?
I've heard of it.
They talked about it. Anyway, we'll talk about it later. That's what your services thing is.
So this is a slide we lovingly refer to as our meatball architecture slide. It shows the hierarchy of our object model and our architecture that we're going to pursue. Our future is all based on .NET, meaning our applications will be implemented as .NET components using the CLR and the .NET runtime. And layer on top of it is the Microsoft Business Framework, which is a set of class libraries and business services that are more focused on the specific requirements of business applications than the generic .NET framework. And in the would-be time frame, our plan is to ship an implementation of the .NET framework that ships with would-be and the Yukon release of SQL Server. This release is going to focus on 4 basic things. Our object model, which is designed around something that we call entities and activities. This is a base class for a business object, like customer, along with, but it's not just a data object because there's some rendering UI and then some service scaffolding around it. But a base class for business object called entity. A base class for activity, which is a type of business process. An entity persistence layer that we're working with the KeyOps team in SQL Server so that we wind up, our plan is to have a single entity persistence layer on top of it. We need entity persistence because from a development and from a partner extension level, we don't want our partners and developers to need to have an understanding of the underlying database, both from a development standpoint and from a reporting standpoint. We want them to be able to call into the customer component or the order component without caring if the customer component is a hierarchy of components that are talking to multiple different types of databases. We want to manage that for them. Then the 4th thing that we're working on is a metadata service, because there's application function that can touch lots of different forms, lots of different reports, that we want to be able to store at a centrally managed place. And there's a very nice central metadata service designed into the DamnGuard Azapta product, and we're implementing that in there. On top of the business framework are a series of business components. These are actual implementations of business entities and business activities. And we're in the process now of defining out what this library of components is going to be and the depth and extent of it. But this would be actual implementations of a generic customer object, order object, inventory object, partner object.
Are these business components, are they just objects, or are there processes associated with those objects based on, say, CPFR or some other well-defined processes?
They won't necessarily be based on things like CPFR, but they will be based on well-defined processes that may not be implemented in a quote, standards-based process definition. They will be the processes and data objects that ship when we ship our application based on this, on a follow-on basis. And we're looking now at defining a loosely coupled integration library that would enable people to have a message format for being able to tie applications based on this object model to applications not based on this object model using a message signature that derives from these object classes. And this is something that we're scoping out right now. It's some of the things that we wanted to do when we started BizTalk like 4 years ago, because when we did that, we started BizTalk as this messaging and integration engine, but we also were thinking about starting an actual business integration library as part of that. On top of the business components, we'll be shipping our actual suite of applications. And I think I have a slide that goes through the ones, but initially we'll be doing GLA, basic distribution, and financial applications that we'll build on top of it. We're designing this as a service that we will use within our own application suite, but we're also designing it as a service that third parties will be able to write to. So with the WIDBE release and with the follow-on shipment of our applications, ISVs will have the option of just writing directly to .NET, writing to our business framework, so they can use our scaffolding to implement their own applications designed around this programming model of entities and activities. They could actually take our actual business objects and write them into their application so that they wind up having customer invoice inventory objects that use the same object definitions as we do. Or they can directly write to our applications and extend them, taking our accounting application and turning it into a hospital management application by using our basic general ledger and then doing extensions to it.
Is BizTalk going to be a part of the MBF going forward?
We're using BizTalk. So MBF is becoming .NET. I don't know if BizTalk is going to wind up being part of .NET or not. I've touched on a lot of these different ones, but this is kind of a marketing slide that we use to summarize our product features that we're going after by implementing all of this around common plumbing. We want to go to a single worldwide code base that's truly integrated. So it has one security model, one extensibility model, one UI model. Integration just works. Employee productivity is a politically correct way of saying we want to integrate Office into our UI. So both from a CRM-ish standpoint, where Outlook is the UI for CRM, because it just makes sense to use Outlook as a basis for communication-based business function within an application. But also from the standpoint of designing a loosely coupled, disconnected, collaborative front end to our applications that lends itself to doing analysis on Excel, lends itself to doing collaboration and iteration around business documents using Word. It also enables us to leverage a lot of the infrastructure that has been designed into Office in terms of the UI controls, in terms of some of their engines into our UI. We want to design the application suite so that when it's deployed to the customer, it enables a customer to connect to thousands of partners. No one has done this before. You have to use EDI or very expensive systems integration to start doing cross-company processes. And we want to be able to do that. And I think I have a few slides on that. We want to design the system so that we can deploy it via a partner at a customer site. It can be customized and extended in a very rich way, we can ship upgrades and the extensions and customizations don't break. Within the business application space, this is huge. Because most companies do this via a source code distribution model. Microsoft, as an SAP customer, licenses the source code to SAP's logic layer, ABAP. And one of the reasons why SAP implementations or Siebel implementations become so expensive is you wind up doing a lot of source code customization to the code that ships, and then upgrades become quite a problem. And then finally, we want to build this as an ISV platform, enabling ISVs to build our stuff, to take our business level application logic and go on top of it. Think about it. So if you think of just at a really high level, a conceptual model of what our applications are, there's a UI layer, there's a set of business application logic, there's a database, and then there's a metadata-driven scaffolding, an infrastructure that determines admin, security, role, context. And then all of this is based around web services as an extensibility model. And this is a picture that we use to walk through different elements of it. As someone in the audience mentioned earlier, we have this initial implementation of the business framework that's shipping with a portal product for Great Plains called the Microsoft Business Portal. And this uses the entities and activities infrastructure to create HTML screens of the Great Plains application for an employee self-service set of scenarios. And it's a way for us to test out the initial MBF model in an incremental manner. So we're doing this today, and by doing so, it enables us to very easily, at a low cost, build an HTML portal-based view of our UI that mirrors the UI that exists in our rich Win32-based client. And if we were doing the 5-hour version of this presentation, I'd be walking you through that. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be using our MBF-based object model to have a common standardized way to build business application logic around entities and activities. If you view the world of declarative to metadata-driven as a spectrum for how you can actually implement behavior within our application, we're at about like 90% over on the metadata-driven side. And we're doing this for a lot of different reasons. The foremost being it gives us a way to have a customization and extensibility model that doesn't require source code distribution. So we have a very strong central concept of central metadata repository that stores all of the information about the application. Let me go ahead. With MBF is the name of our infrastructure. Green is the code name for our project that is the first V1 application of business logic, a new application built on this infrastructure. This is the set of modules that we plan to be shipping with Green version 1. And as you can see, it's a core set of financials, and then it's tied together by a set of supply chain distribution applications like inventory management, purchase order management, and project accounting as well. And tying all of these different models together is the business framework with common sets of activities and entities. This by itself is fairly standard stuff in the accounting and ERP space. These are the type of modules that we sell and all of our different competitors sell. And for this V1, we're going to use a loosely coupled integration framework to tie into our applications that aren't built on MBF and Green, including CRN, MBN, and some of the other applications that we're working on. And we're across the street figuring out what that model is going to be. When we talk about this business application layer, it involves coming up with a design pattern and hierarchy for how we want to implement our business logic, both from a process perspective and a data perspective, that's sensible from a design perspective, but is also actually implemented in our class libraries. And we have to deal with things like common data types, common entities, which may be an aggregation of data types for a specific business piece of data like customer, because customer may consist of address and things like that. Common patterns, which can be implemented as processes or as functions, and then a series of just necessary services that are required if you're going to be selling something around the world, like multi-currency and multi-language. Here's a screenshot. Is this the only screenshot I have? Yeah, there we go. Here's a screenshot of some of the type of UI work that we're prototyping to get across some of the ideas of integrating Office into our current UI. Just from a look and feel perspective, we're using the Plex look of Office 11 moving on to Office 12. We like the Outlook-based paradigm of having the Wunderbar-based navigation on the left-hand side with the multi-level tree view. It works well for the type of forms that we have. Personalization, integrating unified search. Now, you can read these different pieces within here. We're doing this today with a couple of our products. We're shipping, within our small business group that's going after Intuit, we're shipping a contact manager with Office 11 this summer. It's called Business Contact Manager. And they did a really nice job at building a UI for their application that has the look and feel of an Office 11 UI, even though it's shipping with Office, but it's not an Office family product in the sense that Visio is. But they've done some good work on that, and this just gives you a taste of where we're heading. But what we want to be able to do, and one of the design centers for moving to this common entities and activities-based programming model, is to not just have an Office-based look and feel, but to be able to pull data from our application, populate it into Excel or Word, do analytics and iterations on it, and then have that, where appropriate, transactionally be integrated and updated back into an Office system, into one of our back-end systems. So we have a bunch of prototypes and demos that show how our ideas and how we use Office. Just a generic picture of complexity within a company. So what do I have here? Okay. With our MBN offering, we're going after automating processes that take place between companies. And we're doing it in a relatively lightweight way, meaning we want to start moving from fax to actual digital data being sent back and forth between companies. And we're using somewhat of an EDI model, where you have an electronic version of a document that gets derived from our back-end accounting application and gets transmitted to a business partner. But what we've done is we've built an Outlook-based UI container that enables someone who's in a partner management or shipping department within one of our customers to be able to collaborate with business partners using documents that can be rendered in Outlook, even though these documents may be sent to a partner as a fax or as an XML-based SOAP call or as an email message or as an actual EDI using EDI formats. But from the end user perspective, it has the same user experience as just sending mail and using Outlook. But it's also integrated into our back end. This is something that's shipping this summer, and it's a good iterative step on this path towards both integration of Office-based UI with traditional forms-based UI for accounting applications, but also for processes running across companies. Here are some screenshots from MBN. And you can see here that we've got an info path looking piece of mail within Outlook that has a business document with data that comes from one of our back-end transactional applications. In this case, it's an order. But we can take this and we can send it using a send button in Outlook as an EDI document, a fax, an email, etc. And we've got a partner management subsystem and integration into our back ends.
Is it XSD based?
Excuse me?
Is it based on XSD?
It's based on XML schemas. The XML implementation of it.
Can you explain briefly how it differs from Halifax and its goals?
The question was, can I explain how it differs from Halifax and its goals? It's in the same general area as Halifax. What the MBN guys focused on is more on the partner management and the support of multiple capabilities, email, fax, EDI, and specific business processes going back and forth with customers. The Halifax team, which is still a research project in David Vascovich's world, has focused more on the processes, the ad hoc processes that run within a company, and being able to organize and look at the structured and unstructured data within a company. So Halifax has tended more towards new UI that maps to ad hoc processes within a company. MBN is focused on using Outlook and on integrating into our applications and partner management. But there's going to be some integration between the two projects at some point. I already had this slide. My apologies. So some more on our MBF-based programming module on any of these activities and stringing them together to create processes. A little bit on our green roadmap. And this slide is now out of date, now that we've moved over to, and this just happened in the last week, now that we have moved the MBF part of green over to Eric Rudder's organization. We're now planning to ship that lower level of MBF with the would-be release of Visual Studio, which will be in the second half of next year. And we're still working on our schedule for when the green application ships on top of that. So I have two more slides on supply chain issues, and these, I think, wind up being kind of dense, but supply chain's the most complex of any of our domains that we work in. I mean, supply chain, what is a supply chain varies by like who you are. If you're in the supply chain world, you generally view supply chain as all business activities for anything that has to do with any business anywhere, because supply chain involves making the connection between selling things to customers to sourcing them from different types of suppliers. So supply chain architecture pictures wind up involving the various types of front-end customers and distributors that I have going through my logistics, my manufacturing, and sourcing parts from various back-end providers. Our supply chain team some of the guys from our supply chain team came from Hasbro, the toy company, and they wound up setting up Hasbro's distribution system within Nordic countries. So they have some slides that walk through what it's like there. Just in terms of our assessment of supply chain problems, it almost winds up being a communications and integration problem more than anything else, because what you're trying to do is being able to get a good sense of visibility and pulse from the demand side of your from the demand side of your business. It's not enough to know like how many crates of Hasbro toys I shipped into Walmart, because I want to be able to understand like if those are going to be returned to me or if those are going to sell out within the next week, and I have to start thinking about building some more of them. And using traditional EDI-type communications, it's just based on the transaction. Here's what I order. Here's what I ship to you. Here's when I get things back. Now, there are initiatives, and someone raised CPFR, which is an acronym for an industry standards effort called Collaborative Planning and Forecasting, which is an attempt to give you more of that pulse, more of that, here's what I've moved from my store today, just to give you a heads up on what's coming. But there's a need to have visibility into my back end, into my front end, and then turning that around into visibility into my back end. And there's this chain of interconnected needs for visibility into who's buying and shipping what. And because you're dealing with trust issues across different types of companies, you're dealing with integration issues across different types of systems, you're dealing with incompatibility issues because there's different types of communication formats, maybe in different languages, different computer languages. It's just a really, really hard N-way communications problem. Some of the scenarios that we're working on in supply chain is supply chain visibility, CPFR type scenarios where we can get a sense, if I'm a distributor or manufacturer, I can get a sense for this demand pulse coming from my suppliers. Supply chain visibility and accuracy, we're going to re-architect everything we do around RFID because it's going to change the way physical goods business is done. We have no idea how we're going to do this yet, and if it's something that we need to do now or in 5 years, but we're kicking off some research around that. Once you have this better sense of visibility, there's still a need for software tools to help companies figure out what to do. I mean, there's a persona of that guy in Hasbro. We have a bunch of different names for him, but he's generally the guy in a mid-market manufacturer distributor who works in inventory and logistics planning. He has a staff of 2 or 3 people. He wears a short-sleeve shirt with a pocket protector. He's not really a business person. He's not really an engineer. He just knows how the company works. And this is the guy who has a sense of like what we're selling, what we're moving, time of season. And based on just mostly algorithms that he has in his head, he determines how much production to schedule, how much part to source, how much to have available for customers. And there are companies like i2 that have built very complex algorithm-based planning software products to help companies do this on a broad scale. We're going to be building planning products that help companies on a much smaller scale be able to do this. And then there's a whole area of exception and event management. What do I do when I have some unsuspected returns? What happens if like one of my suppliers goes out of business and I have to find an alternate sourcer right away? What happens if I have to go find a subcontractor? How do I manage that? So there's a whole set of things that we're doing there that we're going to need some help on. I think that concludes the formal part of my presentation. Are there any other questions or? Yes?
In the new MDF now, once it's under .NET, what is the mobility? Is there a mobility story?
The question was in the new MVF, is there a mobility story? The answer is yes. We're feeding requirements into MVF to support building your application so that they can work in an environment where some of the application will be running on a portable device. Our first mobile applications that we ship will come out of CRM next year. So we're shipping a version of CRM that can run on a PDA as part of our Danube release of CRM next year.
That's the mobility group within CRM now, right? So that's out. Is that in MBF now or outside of MBF?
There is no mobility group in MBF.
Okay.
Yes?
Is there a mobility group in .NET outside of MBF?
Yes.
Oh, there is.
Yeah, it's the guys who build the .NET Compact framework.
Oh, I see. Okay, great. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Along the same lines, related to something like integration. You have CRM integration as a team, and green integration as a team. You have mobility integration tools for Great Plains.
Yeah.
And then you have your whole idea of this taxonomy of how applications are going to talk together. How do you see those all fitting together?
We're going to have to move to one integration team.
For MBS or for, I think it's into MBS or?
For MBS.
For Visual Studio? How's that?
It'll be an integration team for MBS because the type of integration we focus on is application-specific integration. We want to build as little to no plumbing as possible. So this offsite that I mentioned that I'm at right now is basically our integration offsite. We know we're going to snap to Indigo in the long run, but what we need to do is come up with these semantic-based integration models because anyone who's deployed BizTalk knows that you spend so much of your time dealing with the mapping of the semantic data between the different objects. We want to come up with a tool that minimizes or eliminates the need to. We want to come up with a design strategy that minimizes or eliminates the need to do that.
I have actually a question on, in terms of roadmap, you talked about the size of the market and all that in the beginning, but do you have any ideas on, in terms of MBS market share now and moving forward? Is there any revenue targets, 5 years, 6 years?
Well, yes. The question was, is there any revenue target for us? And a very public revenue target is that we are being asked to grow to be a $10 billion business within 8 years.
So yeah, I mean, I heard that from Bruce Richardson, AMR. You think is that possible?
Absolutely.
Just with small and medium businesses, or
small and medium business is a 14 billion. Small and medium accounting and core line of business applications is a $14 billion market today. It's totally doable.
So actually, we happened to be in a meeting with Darren Labour and guys a few months ago. And Jeff Ricks walked into the meeting, and somebody asked him that question. He went to the board and actually drilled it down and said it's easily doable.
Of course, yes.
How impressive.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Generic question. You've sort of given us a nice overall picture of your goals. Is there sort of a site where you can get some documents on how you're trying to achieve them? Because I work with the mapping tool, like GEOPS and STOPS now, and I understand you're sort of leveraging some of the mapping technology. I've seen some emails around that. But if we're, like the crux of the problem is how do you integrate things and how do you do it well? And
I think the site that will be most relevant to you is HTTP Green, but I'm not sure if that's password if that's protected by a security group or not. But hit that. And if you have issues with it, just shoot me an email.
Cool.
The email is James Yu.
Cool, because this seems like a very interesting problem, and if you want to start thinking about, the integration, it seems it'd be interesting to get feedback from different groups, and if there was a mechanism to do that.
Going once?
Is there some tie-in with the e-business, like David Kuiker's the Jupyter?
The question is there some tie-in with e-business, David Kuiker's Jupyter? We're probably the strongest supporters of Jupyter and BizTalk in the company. So we ship our enterprise edition of CRM ships with BizTalk Partner Edition. We're designing use of BizTalk into Green. We're designing use of BizTalk into our integration framework. We use it all over the place.
When you talked earlier about tying these different objects together and processes together, are you utilizing industry standards? Like I mentioned earlier, some of these well-defined standards for defining business processes. For example, the UNC-FACT BCF or the UML or
the question was, are we using industry standards for tying these processes together like UNC-FACT or, I don't know what the second one was, mentioned earlier?
BCF, the Business Collaboration Framework.
Where it may make sense, we will. But most of these industry standards haven't been implemented and used in any kind of wide manner yet. We know this really well because, we've been working on all these standards. I mean, I was one of the guys who started BizTalk and spent a lot of time working with these folks. We've got Arthur Griff, who was the initial architect for RosettaNet on our team. We've got a bunch of guys who've been working at EDI for a long, long time. I mean, the extent to which these standards are implemented, it's as these company-to-company sorts of things. But a lower level, base object model, we're going to build our own.
So in that case, speaking of standards, especially now that Rational is under IBM, what happens to EML and I think
we're planning to build for Whitehorse.
Oh, so we are going away from the Rational model completely?
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't done that before, so thank you.
Any other questions? Going twice? Going 3 times? Done. Thank you.
Somebody called it.